Hey, how's it going, pop-up campers? Welcome back to It's Poppin', where we talk about everything pop-up camper related. So this video is going to be all about pop-up camper winter storage. And no, I don't mean, how to store your items away inside your pop-up camper, organization, and all that stuff. I'm talking about that unfortunate time of the year where you have to put away the pop-up camper for the season and wait until next spring to pull it back out. So let's get to it. So right off the bat, if you haven't watched our video on pop-up camper water system winterization, after you watch this video, I highly recommend watching that. It's probably one of the first things I would make sure I have done. Make sure your water system is all flushed out. You have antifreeze in the water pump and things of that nature so it doesn't freeze if you're going to be storing your pop-up camper in any type of freezing conditions. So once you've winterized your water lines, I highly recommend cleaning out your pop-up camper. That serves two purposes. First of all, you come back in the spring, open up your camper, it's nice, vacuumed out, wiped out, and clean. But second of all, by vacuuming out, wiping down those surfaces, you're removing any odors of possible food that might be in your pop-up camper. And by removing those, you're discouraging any mice or rodents from wanting to come inside your pop-up camper in search of food. So going along with cleaning out and wiping out your pop-up camper, I highly recommend removing a few items that you might otherwise not think much about. The first, of course, is both perishable and non-perishable foods. So take out that. You don't want mice being attracted to your pop-up camper at all. Remove any liquids that might be in your pop-up camper, especially if you think it might be stored in any freezing temperatures at all. So maybe like dish soaps or anything like that. And then, of course, we remove any paper goods, so paper towels, napkins, paper plates, things of that nature that a mouse or mice might find as good bedding. That would just, of course, discourage them from making a nest in your pop-up camper and further ruining it. So, of course, those are a few things that we make sure we remove from our pop-up camper while we're cleaning it out. Now, while you're also cleaning it out, I would pay special attention to also wiping down your refrigerator. And one thing you can do for your refrigerator while it's in storage is putting some baking soda in it, remove any of those odors that might develop while it's just sitting there closed up. So while you're inside your pop-up camper, it wouldn't hurt to do a few more things. First of all, make sure all of your windows and I guess like bunk ends are all zipped up, all closed up, ready to go into storage. Make sure all of your appliances are turned off. So let's see, like your refrigerator, furnace, air conditioner, just anything that's plugged in or that could possibly be on, definitely make sure that that is off. And then, of course, finally, when you're ready to pop it back down, you can just make sure your lights are turned off. I know the vast majority of pop-ups have a kill switch for the lights, but maybe that's damaged or something. Just make sure those lights are off. And there's one optional thing that we don't do, but actually this might not be a bad idea, and that would be removing your curtains or draperies, any of those fabric materials in your pop-up camper, maybe washing them and then putting them in storage in your house or wherever you have space. So curtains and valances, and if you have the space, maybe even the cushions if you want to clean those up as well, and you don't want to risk the chance of mice or anything like that getting in and ruining those soft goods, if you will, those fabrics. All right, guys, so now we're moving on to the exterior of the pop-up camper. And first thing that's real easy to do, but also easy to forget about, is turning off your propane valve at the tank. That way you're just ensuring that, of course, your propane's shut off and there's no chance that stove's on or furnace is on or anything crazy like that. Beyond that, once you have your roof popped down, I highly recommend taking a look at your roof, at all the joints, at all the seams, and making sure that there's no areas where water could possibly get in while it's in storage. And this, of course, is especially important if you plan on storing your pop-up camper outside and uncovered. So it's just that's an easy way for water damage to occur, especially if it's sitting, for 2, 3, 4 months and water or snow or ice or whatever is getting in your pop-up camper. So my next recommendation also has to do with keeping mice out of your pop-up camper. So as you're going around checking out your roof and your seams and your seals, I also highly recommend looking at any possible areas of ingress where a mouse or mice could get into your pop-up camper. So I'm talking perhaps like the furnace exhaust valve, anything like that where a mouse might be able to get in. I would cover up either with a steel wool or perhaps like a copper mesh. That way they are discouraged from going in there. Now I also recommend looking for other spots that should be closed up and might not be. I know a very common thing that breaks on pop-up campers are the plastic port covers for either your electrical or maybe propane lines, things of that nature. Those are prone to breaking. So if those are left open, that's an easy spot for a mouse to get in and do some damage. So let's move on to the battery, that 12-volt battery, and you may or may not have one, but if you do, what I recommend doing is a couple things. A, make sure it is stored in a location where it won't freeze. So whether that's in a garage or in your basement, something along those natures, because of course that can ruin a battery. Now the second thing, or B, what I recommend doing is make sure that that battery is maintained in some form or fashion. Of course, you can put it on a nice battery maintainer and a smart battery maintainer and just let it sit. That way it'll be 100% when you're ready to go in the spring. You can also just store it and then charge it up. I think the recommendation is about once a month to make sure it's topped off. And this will depend on your specific converter within your pop-up, but let's say you're stored indoors and it's not going to drop below freezing. You can keep your battery on your pop-up camper plugged in, and then of course run your shore power to an outlet, and that way you allow your converter to maintain your battery. Now, what I recommend doing for that is looking into your specific converter model and what its capabilities are to see if that's a viable option for you. I don't like doing that because I don't like having the big 30 amp cord running to an outlet in our garage. I prefer to go the battery maintainer route. And one more thing about batteries, guys, there's actually, and it seems to be kind of a perpetuating, I won't say a myth, but it is grounded in reality, but it's grounded in very old batteries or older batteries before some modern advancements have come up for batteries. But that is that you shouldn't keep your battery on concrete or a garage floor or something of that nature. If you do a few Google searches, and this is just what I did, but if you do a few Google searches, they'll pretty much unanimously say that if you keep your battery on your garage floor or basement floor or concrete, you're going to be okay with these modern batteries. You won't have any problems with excess drainage or anything like that. So as far as your pop-up camper tires are concerned, there's a few things you can do, and maybe something that you should do if you're storing your pop-up camper outside. So the first thing you can do is, if you have the ability or have the means of blocking up your trailer, thereby relieving the pressure off your tires, that's probably a good option to kind of increase the longevity. And what you're going to want to do once you block up your trailer is reduce that pressure down to somewhere around 14 psi. Give your tires a good spin to coat those bearings again, and that's a good storage method. Now, if you're going to be storing your pop-up camper outside, I recommend covering your tires with a tire cover. Once again, that increases the longevity of your tires due to reducing the sun exposure. And I think the actual term is like called weather checking or something along those lines. But if you're not going to do either of those, at a minimum, make sure your tires are on some sort of hard surface, so not just parked on grass or in the yard or whatever. Make sure they're on some sort of maybe concrete block or something along that nature. So let's talk about storage locations. And as I'm sure many of you know, that we store our pop-up camper in our covered garage. The temperature is relatively, stable. It doesn't get too cold or too hot in here. And of course, we're covered by the elements. So because we keep our pop-up camper in the garage, we don't cover it with anything. Now, barring not having, of course, a garage or storage shed or something of that nature where your pop-up camper is covered from the elements, you're going to be storing it outside, right? So there's a few options I think you should consider if you're going to be storing it outside uncovered. If you don't have any sort of either tarp or, breathable cover for your pop-up camper, I highly recommend making sure all the seams, seals, and roof are going to be leak-free if it's going to be exposed to rain, snow, etc. If you're going to be getting one of the breathable covers, I think that's a great option because then you're not at as high of a risk for condensation or moisture in your pop-up camper with that would occur if, of course, you use a non-breathable, just standard tarp. Those standard waterproof tarps, they don't breathe, and therefore they might encourage condensation within your pop-up camper, causing some damage to your canvas and vinyl material. So if you're going to be using a standard tarp, there's a few things that I've read, and I have no experience with this at all, so take it for what it's worth and maybe do some further research. But if you're going to be using a standard tarp, I've heard of people putting pool noodles under the tarp to lift that tarp up off the roof a little bit and encourage some airflow. I've heard of people putting the dehumidifier, I don't even know what it's called, containers that pull water out of the air in the camper to discourage condensation buildup. So I think there's a few tips and tricks that you can do if you're not going to go for the more expensive breathable cover. And finally, if you are storing it outside and you're in an area where it does snow, I definitely recommend clearing that snow off, just because, and if you live in a snowy environment, this, snow can start piling up, it starts getting heavy, and therefore you're putting more stress on your roof, and you don't want to risk your roof being damaged from excess snow. All right, guys, so let's wrap this up with my thoughts on keeping mice out of your pop-up camper, keeping it undamaged from, them getting inside, making nests, and all that nasty stuff that they do inside your pop-up camper. I've hit on this kind of a little bit earlier in the video. Highly recommend cleaning out your pop-up camper so there's no food smells or anything of that nature that would encourage mice to want to come into your camper. And then second, of course, sealing off any possible routes of ingress. Now, of course, you can go crazy with all sorts of different things that are supposedly supposed to keep mice out of your pop-up camper. I've heard of, of course, there's like soap, and there's commercial products, and peppermint, and mothballs, and all sorts of things. In my opinion, I'm not too convinced any of that actually works. And that's why I rely on making sure I'm not encouraging them to come in and I'm not allowing them to come in. But if you want to do some of that, just if it makes you feel good, go for it. But maybe do some more research on the specific item you're using to keep mice out of your pop-up. All right, guys, so that's all of our recommendations for pop-up camper winter storage. Definitely let us know how you guys store your pop-up camper, what methods you use, and maybe any other tips or tricks you might have for other people that we didn't cover here. We'd definitely love to read those in the comments below. And as always, hopefully we see you in the next video. If not, hopefully we see you out there camping, maybe in the spring.